Hello and welcome to Victor George Videos, and today we are building the second knife sheath in this 3-pack pattern that EDC and I collaborated with. This is probably the most challenging one. I wanted to do a second video to make it a little bit more short and concise. I have a tendency to talk too much, and I think my video was ad nauseum as far as detail is concerned. Anyway, I hope you watch that. It tells you everything you need to know. This one was a little bit quicker, but we built it, okay? Get yourself the pattern pack and build these yourself. Remember, we're gonna have a competition for the nicest K-bar sheath out there based on the patterns that we have provided. And with that in mind, let's jump right into the build. Let's build the classic Dangler with this pattern pack, and let's make it a short version. First thing you do is you get your downloadable printed patterns onto cardstock from edcleather.com. First thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your patterns. There's a registration line on every page, 5-inch registration. Quickly confirm that that is the correct size for the pattern. And now what we're going to do is we're going to cut them out. All the pattern pieces are cut out. You have your welt, your shelf with a magnet, your back piece, your belt keeper, your front face, and your safety strap, about 6.5 inches to start with. Okay, after you get your pattern cut out, you'll notice on the original pattern that these two are cut separate and then taped at the AB line. Make sure your center line is straight and tape them, and let's cut them to leather. We've traced the patterns onto good quality 8-ounce veg tan leather, leather of your choice, Herman Oak, Traditions, wherever you source that. Here's an important detail. The patterns are marked flesh side if you cut this piece from the flesh side. If you are like me and you cut from the grain side, it's very important for a right-hand strong sheath that you flip that over on the pattern for the back strap. Let's take a quick look at all the leather pieces that we have cut out and talk a little bit about the hardware. Now, on the belt strap for the Dangler version, I went ahead and cut out for the 24-line snap sets. You'll need 2 sets of the cap and socket and the post and stud for that. For the D-ring, you'll need 2 sets of 8/32 is what I use. Chicago screws, there's the word. And a 1 1/4 inch D-ring. This may be an adjustable step for you depending on the thickness of the D-ring that you use. Remember, we want it tight in there. The welt itself, I'm inserting a quick picture to show you to take a punch at the very apex here before you cut it out. That prevents the end from tearing and gives you a good starting point to cut out the welt itself. The face of the sheath is prepped. Remember that this is according to the pattern on the hair side or the grain side. And you know, think about all of these positions before you actually cut, because I have cut so many left-handed sheaths when I'm trying to do a right-handed sheath. Also, for the safety strap, it's going to require 1 set of the 24-line caps and posts. And also, I went ahead and cut out my slots for the safety strap with a 3/4 inch bag punch, because I am going to insert a safety strap. Again, that's optional. The magnet shelf. So what I did is I took my 3/4 inch punch, punched myself a hole, and then that fits this 3/4 inch magnet nicely. All right, if you don't have one of those, just get you one of these, put the appropriate size hole there, cut it out. You might have to sand it out a little bit to get that nice flush fit. Let's do some more preparatory steps here. So the front face and the welt piece we can set aside for now. What we want to do, we can also set aside the magnet shelf for this particular step. So now what we want to do is we want to take our back strap, our belt keeper, and our safety strap. And the first thing that I do is just take your sandpaper, clean up all of the cuts here. You know, if there's any irregularities, just sand them, make them flush, clean them up a little bit. You'll notice also that this pattern here is a little bit larger than the 1 1/4 D-ring as far as fit is concerned. And what I did to take that into consideration is this still has to be edged, top and bottom, both sides, and then burnished, and that'll bring it in perfectly so that this will eventually be just super snug in there. See, that's what you want, leather all the way into the corners. All right, so sand, edge, nothing too aggressive, and then we're going to burnish. Use the burnish of your choice. Hagel's Edge Solution by Martin's Mix or Tokenol. I personally use beeswax with a little bit of moisture. It's just the way I like doing it. All right, so prep these steps. Let's do a quick little overview on what we've done so far in anticipation of the final assembly. So I took the back panel piece, went ahead and put my maker's mark in there. If you don't want to do it in there, you could do it onto the belt loop for the Dangler. But anyway, be proud of your work, show that. I went ahead and edged, burnished, and creased these lines in there. Remember, all of this is blank canvas. You can carve, tool, stamp, whatever you want to do. So I edged and burnished all of these 3 pieces. They are ready to go. For the video, I did it really fast. Take your time. Each piece is its own individual action. So take your time, do it right. So we'll set these aside for the next step. Now, I forgot to show you earlier on the front panel pattern pack, you'll get a little cutout here for a 1 to 1.5 ounce piece of cover leather. And I will show that in the fabrication steps on how I apply that to keep the magnet from coming out. But anyway, that would be that piece right there. Again, cut it out with a pair of scissors. The sheath face itself, along with the welt, if you'll notice in my last long video, I clipped the corners. I do that when I have a single row stitching. So this is a 1/2 inch welt. So a 1/4 inch distance would be your single row stitching. It's okay to clip the corners. If you're gonna do a double row stitching, which I really like to do, especially with different stitch spacing. For example, on the outer most sheath, it's 5 mil, the inner, it's 4 mil. And that is a really, really nice touch. So of course you can do a different color thread on each end, and that is the double row stitching. Again, I don't clip my corners for that. I went ahead and stamped them out and they're ready to go. Now let's do some skiving. Okay, so on the pattern pieces itself for the shelf and the magnet, and I'll show a little bit better on this video what the shelf really does. So it'll give you a little bit of an area of guidance for the location of skiving. The important part, of course, like I've said, is these pieces have to be skived to feather. You can use a skive, a French edger, your head knife on a piece of glass or marble. It's always nice to skive from. Again, you can feather edge that on your 2x72 or with a hand sanding pad, whatever it takes. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. So I usually start pretty close to the corner, and these are the corners. Have a sharp blade. I polish the backside of my skive for a little bit psychological smoother cutting, and then just very carefully I start at the edges, and then as I get towards that part there, I try to get a little bit deeper. This is a skill that you have to sort of master. And then all these little ridges, you'll want to just sort of clean them up. Okay, the goal again is get that to feather. All right, that's what you want. And you're gonna do the same thing on the flesh side of the shelf or magnet piece. And again, these were slightly moistened to make it a little bit easier. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing here. Am I in there? And then your individual ridges, sort of clean them up a little bit. You can even take that to your sander with a flap sander and then clean it up. Get that thing to a nice feather edge, and we'll work on that a little bit more off camera. Get that nice and smooth. Okay, that is the step for those skived pieces. We are ready to glue up a few pieces here. So on the shelf, the magnet shelf itself, you can take, because this isn't going to cover the whole thing, so just take a little bit of dye and do the very corners there if you like. It's all optional. Make it pretty. On the back side, the flesh side of the magnet piece, I go in about 1/4 of an inch, and I give myself a glue line indicator, and I place this just to get an idea of where the front glue line is. I sent that over there, and I draw myself a line. So the glue is basically going to be through here. All right, I use Top Fit, of course, Masters, Barge, the stuff from Home Depot. Any contact cement works wonderfully. So that is prepped for gluing. I'll do that off camera here in a second. Now, the welt and the front face. What I do to prep that for gluing is I take the welt that has excess design into the pattern. I will take a 1/2 inch wing divider and I will just mark the inside here to give me my glue line, and all this will be cut off excess later. On the inside of my sheath face, I also give myself a little scratch line, so everything here is going to be glued. Anytime you bond 2 pieces of leather, you might want to scratch them up a little bit for better adhesion. This happens to be a copper tube reamer that I just mounted into a handle. It's very aggressive. It works for me. Use whatever tools you have. So now, the front face, the welt, the magnet piece, and the 1.5 or 1 to 1.5 ounce good quality garment, or I don't know what kind of kip leather, maybe. That's what we're going to glue up. So I will be right back with those glued. Let's glue up the welt to the front face, and everything is glued and ready. It's sat for a few minutes to tack up. So on my line here and on my line back here, I just make sure, first of all, that the top is perfectly flush and on the line. That's all set to go. And now I'm just going to walk it around. Make sure it's on that line. Do the same thing on the other side. And make sure you're careful there. That glue will bite to itself. Okay. All systems are go there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a convex hammer, and the point of contact cement is that the glue itself sticks to itself. Let's take a polished hammer and help that bond. All right, set that aside. Before we trim the excess, let's let that glue cure a little bit. On the shelf piece itself, I just realized I forgot to glue that side. Let me do that. You can use a hairdryer if you're impatient for that glue to tack up. So now we're going to take our leather and we're going to put it centered in onto the flesh side here, onto that 1/4 inch line. And I also glued the very top of the edge of that. Nothing was edged with an edger, so it's square, 90 degrees across. And I'm going to bring this piece firmly, kind of pull it, stretch it a little bit, You can see the magnet there. All right. That's not going anywhere. Okay, take a little bit of a tack hammer, give it that permanent bond. Don't hit the magnet, because these rare earth magnets will crack on you if you give them too hard of a strike. All right, so our pieces are prepped. Now I'm going to trim the excess from the sheath face. I just sharpened my knife on an oil stone and I got oil on it, so don't do that. So now I cut these straight edges 90 degrees and with a sharp knife. And now one way to do the rounded corners is just follow the edge of that sheath face and do short little cuts in a straight line. Keep that blade against the edge of that sheath. Okay, now take your sandpaper or your salon board and clean that up so that it's flush. That's ready to go. The shelf piece itself is ready to go. And I marked on each side my 1/2 inch border. You can see that this material will go under the welt. So now what we have to do is we have to establish in between these welt pieces, and I'll go just a hair below 1/4 inch. Give myself a line there. I'm going to take my 5mm pricking iron from, this one happens to be from Maker's Leather Supply. I think Weaver has one. And so just on the inside of that line, go ahead and give yourself your stitch spacing. And we'll do the same thing over here, because you don't want to get into the area where the sheath face is going to be sewn over that. So right there, establish your stitch distance. 5mm is what I use. We shall set that aside. That is now prepped. This is the next step to prep. I did a bunch of preparatory steps on this back strap. The first thing that I did was I placed the safety strap into the slots and sewed it with a 5mm stitching iron. Another thing that I did is I established the stitching holes for the D-ring, and I drew a line from this corner to this corner where I glued, and from that corner to that corner. And the way I established that line, I'm not sure if I showed you or not, but that's how you get that line. Now, we need to, before we fold that over, we need to get this D-ring on there. And one way to do it is fold the body of the sheath over and just run it up into there. And now we're going to fold and glue that sheath together. Make sure the corners line up and all systems are working. And earlier I said feather edge. What that basically means is try to get that as paper thin as you can. All right, so that's good. Now I'm going to sew this D-ring in position on the sheath. So this is not a paint by the numbers kit. There's still a lot of leather working fabrication techniques that you need to employ. So this is fun, easy, but there is a challenge, as all good leather projects should be. All right, so now we have the D-ring sewn in. As you can see, it's nice and tight. That's what you want. You don't want it to turn in on itself. And now we're going to prep all of this for the final sewing. So the way I do that is I take my back piece, this is the flesh side, fold it in, flesh side, this flesh side. I take my sheath face and I butt it up to the very bottom, and I make sure it's all flush and in position. And once I do that, I'll just take a little bit of a mark here, just like that. That gives me my indicators, and this is where the top of this shelf is going to seat, okay, with glue. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically draw myself another glue line right there. So from this line, and I'll do that so that you can see it clearly enough. So this line to this line is your glue line. Now I'm going to take my roughening tool and I'm going to rough this all up in preparation for gluing these two pieces together. And I'll show you how that shelf works and in just a minute here. So anyway, we have that. We're going to take our piece and just sort of set it there to see how it's looking. And now we're going to glue all of this to all of this. A lot of little steps involved even in this short video, so I want to make sure that everything's clear for you, so that's why I'm going through these stages. So now we have the shelf or magnet piece set up. We have the glue area established. Now we're going to press these together. And we're going to make sure the edges are flush. Everything's good. Our glue line goes to our glue line. All right. Now we want to make sure that these edges are flush. Clean that up a little bit. Just makes the final true up a little bit easier when you do that. Okay, so now we are just going to place our stitch holes here where they were indicated. Punch through that. Make sure we're not going into our welt stitched area. I will sew that and be right back. Remember that shelf is optional, but I think it's such a unique feature that really lends itself well to this build. So I'll sew that up. All right, a couple of quick pointers. I used 0.85 braided wax thread here. Happen to use red in this particular case. Also, this here is 0.85, and this is 1/0 or 1 mil braided wax thread as well. You can get Ritza, Main Thread Company, anything you want. Okay, so the shelf is in place. I went ahead and glued in the indicated lines, and now it's time for the final glue up prior to sewing. So I'm going to butt this up to the very top. Make sure that it's flush. And then press it down. Everything looks good, except for that stone oil mark. But it's a good lesson for us all. Now we're going to contact that. Now we're going to let the glue cure. See how the shelf is. And all it's going to require eventually for you is when you do this, just you know, stain everything, dye everything, do whatever you would do to make it pretty. And we are in the final stages. So all systems are go. Finish our double row stitching. Now it's time to tap the stitches flat, fill in all the little micro gaps, do it on a hard surface. Okay, now off to sand the edges, edge the corners, top and bottom to 600, and do the strap, do the keeper, and we're done. Ready for the flap sander? I go from 80 grit to 240 and then by hand to 600. Doing it in this configuration allows me to see that perfect 90-degree angle. All right, let's take it and have the edges top and bottom, and we're close. Now we're gonna edge. I use a fairly large edge edger to get a nice rounded corner, top and bottom. Just noticed I missed a little spot right there at the top of the sheath face. For that, I need to use my plug to give it a little bit something to bite against. Okay. Okay, let's fit that knife, get that safety strap in there, and then cut our belt. So I had another senior moment. I only need one Chicago screw here. I have no idea why I thought two. Anyway, I was way ahead of myself. So now we have the snap set in. I had to trim this about a 1/16 of an inch to be able to fit it correctly. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna place this. Of course, this is optional. You do have a belt loop here available for a higher ride. We're gonna put that in, and I'm gonna go ahead and snap this and set my screw. Okay, so that's in there. The belt here probably will fit a 1 3/4 inch, maybe even all the way up to a 2 inch. You adjust that strap however you need. The swivel effect works really nice. And there she is. The Dangler K-Bar USMC. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. All right, so we finished the Dangler, which is probably the most challenging of all three of the sheaths to do. It's fun, but it is a little bit more challenging. A few more steps involved. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you can build the first high ride and this Dangler, the classic is a piece of cake for you. Remember, straps are an option, shelf's an option, magnets an option. Do whatever you like. Get ready for an upcoming competition. You're gonna win a new K-Bar and some other swag from both EDC and Viktor George. Get yourself a pattern set. Basically, you get all three sheaths, $9.99. Boils down to about $3.33 for each sheath pattern. That's a great bargain. I hope you do that. It helps out both EDC and I, and it just gives us motivation for more. So thank you very much. Have a great day, and look forward to seeing what you build.